The peace and tranquility of the Wiltshire countryside. And spring is in the air. The daffodils arrived at the entrance to the village much earlier than expected at the beginning of March. Now, bright red tulips and yellow marigolds nestle alongside the bed of newly mown green grass, like traffic lights on either side of the main street. Something which local parish councillor Dorothy Cottrell has been preparing to write about in this month's edition of the 3 Acres Parish magazine. It's business as usual in the village. What's unusual is that you won't find Acrebury on any Ordnance Survey map. It primarily exists in the mind of radio producer Gerry Hughes. And for the past 40 years, people across Wiltshire have followed the twists and turns in this West Country drama through the medium of radio. But if we carefully strip away the images created by his sound effect library, what lies behind this drama is a true Wiltshire eccentric.
Gerry as a teacher, sexy farmer's daughter, village battle-axe, vicar and cadger.
I said, who's going to do all the parts? And he said, well, Gerry. And I said, well, that should be interesting.
Those early days were very special, and they were pioneering ones in a way for Gerry, and of course for Acrebury too.
Good morning, my darling. Oh, good morning, kind sir.
One guy doing all the voices, male, female. I'm thinking, this is an absolute impossibility.
This is, well, it was a cupboard that I had once, and before it got broken up, I recorded it.
This was a sparkling piece of drama, voiced by one man. Now, how fantastic is that?
People in Cornwall loved it, people in Bristol, all the local radio stations that we broadcast on, desperate for the next instalment.
Why do you think this house has been sold, eh? Why?
I don't know.
Because my husband has left me.
This is the story of Acrebury and the man who created an entirely fictional village through words and sound.
After announcing astonishingly that he cannot marry Carol Barrett, Ray Burton refuses to tell her...
In the small L-shaped bedroom of a bungalow in Lynham, the school caretaker's son had a vision. While other teenagers were kicking footballs in the street or dreaming of flying the Hercules aircraft seen at the nearby RAF base, 18-year-old Gerry Hughes was putting together a small recording studio and developing an idea inspired by his love of radio drama.
I always loved English at school and writing essays and stories and things like that, and I always had a bit of a fertile imagination. And it occurred to me that I hadn't come across many novels or up-to-date stories that were based in Wiltshire or in this area generally. And I thought, well, we see dramas and read stories that are based in the Midlands or the North or London or Scotland, Wales, whatever, but very, very few around Wiltshire. And I thought, well, you look around, Wiltshire's got so much to tell. It's such an ancient county. We've got wonderful characters here. And I wanted to do something about it. And my intention was to write a novel. Although I'd grown up at Lynham, where there was a big RAF base, it still was a farming village. My grandparents were market gardeners, and I knew lots of the local farmers and things. And it wasn't really until I left school and went to work for a local agricultural engineering firm in Wootton Bassett that I then actually started to meet the people from the village and the villages and things, and this gave me inspiration.
It was a time of change. Local government was being restructured across Wiltshire as Salisbury and Swindon now came under the control of the county council. The changing needs of local communities were reflected in Amesbury with a new sport hall and youth centre. Ramsbury had its own bishop for the first time in 900 years. Gerry's desire to tell the story of Wiltshire people was developing after starting out as an idea for a novel. It was his meeting with a new teacher at his school in the now royal Wootton Bassett which changed everything.
One of our teachers was an electronics engineer called Keith Souter. A lovely man. We became very, very great friends. And he wanted to set up his own radio station at the school. I don't think it ever happened, but there were quite a lot of us lads that were interested. But he had been one of the founders of Hospital Radio-Swindon. So I went to see him one lunchtime, and he said, I've got a very good quality tape recorder, a reel-to-reel tape recorder for sale. Would you be interested in it? And I was thinking of setting up a little studio because I was interested in broadcasting as well. And I did. I bought it from him. I paid him off every week and set up the studio in the small back bedroom of our parents' place at the caretaker's bungalow, Preston Lane, Lynham, because Dad was caretaker there. And I took my story, which never ever got put into novel form, and thought, I tell you what, let's have a go at doing it as a radio play. And I started messing around, and then I discovered I could change my voice. And I began to see these characters and hear them. And I went away, recorded this little drama in the studio, took it into Sir Keith Souter at the school the following Monday lunchtime, thinking, I'll have a jolly good old laugh. Anyway, he didn't laugh. His jaw dropped. He heard, I think, about the first minute of the tape and said, that is fantastic. If you can give us a quarter-hour episode a week, a long-running serial, you're in. And that's how Acrebury was born.
Even before drafting a first script, Gerry Hughes had imagined what his fictional village, called Acrebury, would look like. But a school trip to Oldbourne, about 6 miles from Marlborough on the edge of the Lambourne Downs, changed everything.
We've got cottages lining one side, the west side of the green, from various different periods in time, I would say. You've got the church to the northern end of the village green, spanning it, St Michael and All Angels. It's a very, very beautiful church, very, very ancient. I believe it's known as the Cathedral of the Downs. There's a war memorial on the green just in front of it. Albourne really has had very, very much of a grip on me, and it was all thanks to Doctor Who back in 1971 when they did the Demons here, and the village was posed as Devil's End, and I was a big Doctor Who fan. And shortly after it was shown, we came through on a school bus on our way to London. The M4 didn't come all the way through then. You had to go this way to pick up later on. And we saw the church, and all of us in the bus are saying, where's the heat barrier then? Where's it gone in? We've gone through it. That's all part of the Doctor Who story. But there I was on the coach thinking, my story that I'm dreaming up, my modern-day country story in Wiltshire, this is the sort of village I think it would be. And it really went from there.
The current landlady of the Blue Boar, Joanne Hehere, showed him round.
The bar was in a different position at one time.
Right, yes.
So
it's quite a while since I've been to Albourne, I must admit, and certainly in the Blue Boar, so all sorts of things could have changed. But it certainly is how I envisage the Boar's Head in Acrebury. You know, you've got these lovely oak beams and things. You've got that lovely log-burning fire over there, there in the other end there, and low entrances to back doors and goodness knows what else. And internally, this is very much how I see the place when there are scenes taking place in the Boar's Head. How do you feel about your pub being an inspiration for a one-man radio soap?
It's brilliant that could have been the inspiration. I mean, it is a lovely pub. It's in a lovely village right on the green. The
bar, L-shaped bar, yes. Entrance, a flap entrance to go in, yes, that's where you'd see John Clark behind the pub serving the regulars, Fred Partridge. Over there in the corner there would be a seat that is dedicated to the memory of Collingbourne Tuck. He died at the age of 110 years ago, and they still reserve his seat and his favourite tankard.
Right.
So you might have a chair similarly here in the Blue Boar one day.
Yeah, you never know. Bob, we might put a plaque
Bob's
up
in there
above
at the
his
moment.
chair.
Let's hope Bob's there for many years yet.
Now, with a clear image of Acrebury village in his head, Gerry set about creating the characters who became the stars of his production.
One of the main characters, which I suppose at the time, if you're going to make any comparisons, would have been a cross between Walter Gabriel and Tom Forrest in The Archers, a good old country gent. And he was named Collingbourne Tuck. Well, I knew a family of Tucks, and I knew a family of Collingbournes that lived near Lynham. And somebody said to me one day, how on earth did you come up with the name Collingbourne Tuck? And I said, it's easy. I said, well, Miss Collingbourne married Mr. Tuck, and they decided to call their son Collingbourne Tuck. And after I said it, I thought, where on earth did that come from? Because I hadn't even thought about it. And he was a wonderful character, and I loosely based him on a cousin of my mother's. And there was an old gentleman who used to live in a cottage opposite the Lynham Parish Church. And his name was Jimmy Gingell. And he used to wear a little cloth cap, and he'd be leaning on the gate. You'd often go past and see Jimmy leaning on the gate, and you'd have a little natter with him. He'd watch the world go by. And I thought, he's Colin Bourne-Tuck.
And who may you be? Can't you guess? Tatty cloth cap, a suit that looks as if it came from a jumble sale, egg down your tie and a face that looks as if it hasn't seen salt and water in a month. You must be Colin Bourne-Tuck, the one and only, at your service.
The female characters, well, I always said the character voices were a little bit like blending colours. You blend two colours to make a third and stuff. So really, the female characters were really just based on a high-pitched voice. So Carol, who played a great big part in it, she was the female, but then I would age her to make her mother, Betty Barrett. I'm leaning on a stone wall which separates the entrance to the Lawns Park and a 3-storey red brick building here in Old Town Swindon. This was the Toc H hostel, it's now called Redlands, and it's in Charlotte Mews. And in the basement of this was the original headquarters of Hospital Radio-Swindon, and that's where Acrebury used to get broadcast. But sometimes if there was a problem, Keith Suter had a studio in his own home in Westercott Road in Old Town, and he could actually intercept or override the hospital broadcast from there.
Behind the scenes at Hospital Radio-Swindon, 4 members of the Rowland family were involved in making programmes for patients. 2 presenters adopted stage names to avoid confusion. Ray became Ray Buse. His brother Steve took the name Simons. Their uncle, Keith Rowland, kept the family name.
Well, Gerry Hughes, I first met him at the Hospital Radio studio when he was introduced to me by Keith Suter. He said that Gerry wants to do a serial for us, you see. And I said, well, that's rather a nice idea. Yes, we could fit that in quite well. I said, who's going to do all the parts? And he said, well, Gerry. And I said, well, you mean he's going to write it, he's going to produce it, and he's going to do all the voices? Yes, that's right. I said, well, this will be interesting. Well, when I first heard it, I thought, well, this is unbelievable, because I could believe every character that he was coming up with. What amazed me was the women's voices as well. I'm sure he'd done it electronically because, would have done himself a mischief other than that. One lady who was due to be discharged said, no, she's not going until she's heard the next episode of Acrebury.
Hello, everyone. Well, I expect you've all come to find out what's been happening in the village.
As Acrebury's reputation grew, Gerry Hughes was getting more creative. Steve Simons presented a Saturday morning programme.
Gerry had brought Acrebury in, which was totally new to our environment. I didn't realise that it was just one person that was doing it. It just got to that one time, and I'm 2 miles away from the actual tape recorder, and I just said, it's 11:15. It was Acrebury, and Acrebury started up with its theme tune.
In 1975, Gerry fulfilled a dream after being invited behind the scenes of the most successful radio drama of them all, The Archers. Steve Simons went with him.
He said to me, do you want to come along with me? And I was free at that point, and I said, yeah, I'll come. And so I went for the complete day up to Pebble Mill Studios to meet the complete cast of The Archers. They showed us how they did it. They were wonderful. Jill Archer, who was a lady's named Patricia Green, and she was a real love. And she sat down there, and she was so interested in it. Bob Arnold, who played Tom Forrest, he was there. And in fact, they were quizzing him about it. And he was trying to get sort of like techniques off them at that point as well, to think how they got it together. In fact, they were quite flattered, and they did ask him to do some characters and bits and pieces, and actually describe the plot as well that he was going through at that time. Up to the ceiling, they had some steps. They had wooden, concrete, carpet, metal, and the sound effects on the wall. There was so many front doorbells on the wall and knockers of doors, and they just sat there pressing them to make the sounds. It was fascinating.
By the time the long, hot summer of 1976 arrived, Gerry's one-man drama attracted the interest of a national newspaper.
Sunday People, 18th of July, 76. Gerry,
as a teacher. Sexy farmer's daughter. Village battle-axe. A farmhand. Vicar. And a horsey upper-crust lady. Jerry's a first-pot farmer's wife and cadger.
Acrebury gradually attracted more media attention. The BBC television news programme Nationwide sent a camera crew to Lynham to see him at work.
Gerry Hughes, a 21-year-old stores assistant, has created a farming serial all of his own. Acrebury is this recording studio he built himself at his mum and dad's bungalow in Lynham.
Carol, she's been quite a girl in her time. In the first episode, her fiancé proposed to her, and then at the end of that episode, he broke it all off, and she married the then vicar's son, and has since been divorced because she had a child with the original fiancé who proposed to her. And
it all sounds very sordid to me.
Looking back, it did. At the time, it was all right, but it's very sordid looking back at it. You know what they say about the permissive 70s, and you've got to yield to them a bit, have you?
The TV footage shows Gerry making good use of every inch of space in the bungalow. 40 years on, is it as he remembers it? The Hercules no longer flies overhead in Lynham, and the school has grown. Bob Robinson, the current school caretaker, invited him back to take a look.
Hello, Bob. Nice to meet you.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you.
Would you like to come in the house?
Yes, thank you. My goodness me. These are strawberries.
Yeah.
I put these in. This is my dad's vegetable garden at the back here, you see, and I actually put
When?
those strawberries in. Oh, my goodness me. It must have been circa 1968.
Wow.
Yeah,
still
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely still there.
Wild, definitely wild.
That's right. Yeah, there used to be a trellis up here to give us a bit of privacy, and I used to play on the back lawn here, and I used to play bat and ball up against that wall there. Yeah. Different front door, but yeah, my goodness me. This seems so small to me because we actually had a dining table here. We did have a big sort of chest of drawers there with our old radio on it. And I used to sit there and listen to soap operas and things. How about that?
And one day I can do that.
Yeah, well, absolutely you can.
Can I go to the office?
Right, yes, let's go on down the corridor here. And here we go, into this little room, which, Bob, I believe is now your office.
Yeah. Yep.
I cannot believe that this was my original studio, a little L-shaped room. It seemed so big at the time. I had, where you've got your desk on the end wall here, I had turntables, I had tape machines, I had a stand in the corner there, and the cupboard's still there, and I used to use that cupboard door. Can I open it? Yes. It's exactly the same door which gave me the same sound for a door that I used to use on Acrebury.
Wow, this is interesting. Living history. Amazing.
But this is
and it's quiet.
First recording studio where Acrebury was born. The first ever episode was recorded in here.
The 80s arrived, with punk on the way out and the new romantics on the way in. Gerry's studio facilities were becoming more professional, and he was acquiring anything with locks or latches, knockers or knobs to enhance his sound effect possibilities. By now, interest in Acrebury began to snowball as the word got around.
Mr. Happy, the man with 8 faces.
The new Archers.
I'm a one-man soap.
The chance to increase Acrebury's profile arrived when Wiltshire got a new experimental cable TV channel called Swindon Viewpoint. Gerry arranged a meeting with programme presenter Shirley Ludford.
I hadn't too long started audio broadcasting on the cable network. Gerry just came in through the door one day and said that he'd had this story called Acrebury that he'd developed into a play and would love to have us listen to it with a view to broadcasting it. And when we heard it, I thought, this is absolutely amazing. I couldn't believe that one person could produce so much. And going back a while as well, when technology was different, much more was sort of very hands-on. I was really impressed by the quality of what Gerry had produced.
During one of Gerry's visits to Swindon Viewpoint, he was introduced to a young journalist at the Swindon Advertiser called Ian Patterson.
Basically, this sort of bespectacled figure was there. And people said, this is Gerry, you should meet Gerry, he's a very, very interesting bloke. And I said, oh yeah, fair enough. And they said, no, he's a really interesting bloke. He does his own soap opera. And I thought, oh yeah, you mean he writes bits and pieces for the soap opera? And they said, no, he does it. He does the complete thing, the recording, the writing, the editing, the producing. And I said, right, I want to meet this Gerry Hughes. And we struck an immediate friendship. And I've been seeing Gerry on and off on my travels for over 30 years now. I've always wanted to be a writer, and back then I basically pestered Gerry. I said, look, I know that you feel very, very protective of Acrebury and you do it all and everything, but could you just maybe let me have a go at doing some episodes? And at first he looked very dubious, because it was very much his baby. And then he thought, all right then, go on. And in the end I did 10 episodes. That would be about 2 weeks worth, with him acting as script editor. And it was a very, very, very pleasant experience.
Yes, I'm a legal lodger, and you've broken the terms of your tenancy agreement as warden. They want us out by the month or they'll evict us. Monty, what's happening? First those horrible letters and now this. Why are they doing this to us? What do they want? I don't know, love.
It changed my life. Having done these 10 episodes, I had been well and truly bitten by the bug. And although I continued in journalism until the mid-1990s, I always had the dream burning away that I would be a full-time writer. And now I am. And when anyone ever asks me, how did you get into writing? I always say, well, actually, it's a funny thing. I was involved with this thing called Acrebury. And then I tell them all about it.
By the autumn of 1982, the UK began climbing out of recession, and as victory parades marked the end of the Falklands War, commercial radio arrived in Wiltshire. Gerry volunteered to help out behind the scenes, where Alan Thompson was the afternoon show presenter at Wiltshire Radio.
Gerry came in initially as a volunteer to help me with the afternoon show, which I was presenting. I found him to be a very competent, very likeable sort of guy, but very competent producer. And he recorded a lot of our historical elements that went into the programme. It seems hard to believe now that a commercial radio station did something on local history, but we did at the time. And Gerry was certainly one of the best people I think I used for it.
By April 1984, Acrebury had been broadcast on Hospital Radio for an incredible 10 years, and Gerry Hughes was developing new ideas. His one-man production ventured into new territory when he persuaded friends like Alan Thompson to make guest appearances.
Well, Gerry asked myself and another woman that lived locally that worked at Wiltshire Radio as a volunteer. Carol played my wife. She was the wife of the local PC Ferris. But I knew Carol at that time from Wootton Bassett, and this is where I suppose you could say that life imitated art, because Carol and I eventually got together and got married. So we're not married any longer now, but we did. Gerry had seen her a lot more than I had, and he got both of us together for the 2 parts. And life imitated art on that occasion.
Would you like to come into the office?
Oh, thanks. You're new here, aren't you?
Been here just a month. Sit down.
Oh, thank you.
In case you didn't know, I'm PC Brian Ferris.
Oh, Carol Harris, Mrs.
But after 578 episodes, in November 1985, Gerry was forced to take a break after becoming unwell.
The illness progressed over a 5-year period and got progressively worse. I lost my father through a massive heart attack in 1983. And because mine was an abdominal illness, I think the stress of losing my father in that time had gone to my abdomen and made things down there a heck of a lot worse. The stress was a big factor in my condition, and it just had to come to a point where I thought, I've got to write all this stuff, I've got to record all this stuff, and I had to go to Keith Souter and all those at Hospital Radio and say, I'm afraid I'm going to have to bring it to an end for a while. I think had I not done so, I think things might have been worse. I had an operation which put me right, and then life carried on again.
Like all good dramas, the conclusion of the final episode of Acrebury was shrouded in mystery.
It'd have been it. Somebody have took it. One of the newspaper people, I expect.
I'm not so sure. How do you mean, Vicar? That stone was large and heavy. It would have taken 10 men to have lifted it. They would have been seen. Not only that, this piece of ground where it stood is completely unmarked. The amount of time it was stood here would have discoloured the grass and beaten it down. It's as if the memorial was never here at all. Eh?
The surgery and convalescence which followed meant Acrebury was shelved. Gerry resumed full-time work, and thoughts of a dream job in radio faded until an unexpected phone call in 1988. Alan Thompson had left his role at Radio 210 in Reading to take up the role of programme organiser at the new BBC local radio station for Wiltshire.
Well, Gerry came in initially to help out in the record library. He's now music manager there, and he also was responsible in the early days of sorting out the outside broadcast stuff, because I wanted to get him in. That was the main thing, and I had a vacancy for that at the time, and I said, look, if you can come in and do this, once you're in sort of thing. He already came in with a good idea of a parochial programme based on, very similar to Down Your Way on Radio 4, which was running at that time. And so the name of Down Wiltshire Way was then coined. And as such, he put a lot of his production knowledge into producing that particular series.
BBC Wiltshire Sound went on air on the 4th of April 1989.
Putting Wiltshire first, you can hear the difference. BBC Wiltshire Sound.
It's 6 o'clock. I'm Jane Garner. Good morning. BBC Wiltshire Sound is now on the air and ready to face the competition head on.
The creative talents of Gerry Hughes were put to good use through Down Wiltshire Way, which indulged his passion for Wiltshire people and places. Inevitably, the more characters he met, the more he became inspired.
Down Wiltshire Way was a weekly programme, and I was getting out there into the Wiltshire villages and meeting all these different people. I think it gave Acrebury a better grounding because I was seeing for real what people were doing. So that in itself was much better grounding for bringing Acrebury back.
Every day, Gerry was busy supplying the selection of music for BBC Wiltshire Sound's programmes, and in between, planning his next destination in search of more of Wiltshire's characters for his weekly programme. But life was about to change when senior producer Keith Stainer stopped by for a chat.
We had a science fiction, a sort of Blake Seven type science fiction drama going out on the afternoon show. And that was coming to an end. That was quite a risk. We wanted something that was more locally produced. And so we were searching for a form of drama to be placed around 3:10 in the afternoon. The idea was that people could sit down, have a cup of tea, mid-afternoon tea, and listen to something. I knew Gerry Hughes from Hospital Radio-Swindon. I knew about Acrebury, and so the suggestion was to Gerry that we would bring Acrebury to the BBC afternoons. I was quite enthusiastic about getting it back to air, if it was going to be achievable.
BBC Wiltshire Sound's station manager was Sandy Milne.
The thing I remember most about Acrebury was really how enthusiastic Gerry was about the project, and having drama on local radio was extremely unusual. We didn't have the resources to be able to do drama, so actually being able to put drama to air I thought was a fantastic thing to do that fitted in exactly with what local radio is about, especially when the stories were about what happened in your local area. Acrebury, for me, was a village in Wiltshire, and the stories were the sorts of stories that happened in villages across the county. So it was absolutely ideal. And the fact that it was done by one person who wrote it, who did all the voices, who did all the recording and put it to air, just meant that we could do it, and in a way that we wouldn't have been possible any other way.
A new radio soap opera ready to rival The Archers is being made for BBC Wiltshire Sound. Characters from the fictional village of Acrebury will be brought to life in a daily serial.
2 till 5, Monday to Friday. The Afternoon Show with Graham Seaman.
It was suggested that my programme would be the perfect platform for a soap opera, one that was made by just one person. Being a bit quirky at the time, I thought, hey, this sounds like a bit of fun. So, yeah, great, let's put it in. So we did. I had a bit of an insight to Acrebury because I knew Gerry quite well, and I realised, of course, that he played around with this idea in Hospital Radio. He'd already given me a bit of a preview of some of the things he'd done, so I sort of knew what I was letting myself in for. I just thought it was such a fun idea, and because it was so Wiltshire-based and some of the characters he was creating, to me, it just had all the hallmarks of this is going to be fun, it's going to be great, and I think people are going to love it. I remember one day somebody phoned me up, they'd listened to the cliffhanger and they were trying to get out of me what was going to happen next. Thing is, Gerry never used to tell me because he didn't trust me. I think that was the problem. So people really hooked into it and enjoyed it.
Acrebury was a success, but this time on the bigger platform of the BBC. A former supporter of Gerry's talents, Shirley Ludford, had now also moved to join BBC Wiltshire Sound.
I was absolutely delighted when it did start to appear on programmes on a regular basis. And during the time that I was at the BBC and heard those programmes, even during then, the quality continued to improve, increase. The listenership, was actually even more enamoured by the work that Gerry was producing. And now I was chuffed to bits that Gerry did have such a big platform.
Listening with interest in another part of Wiltshire was current Late Show presenter Trevor Fry. His wife Sue has worked for the BBC for many years in the department which produces drama programmes for national radio.
First time I heard about Acrebury, I'm thinking to myself, this is not going to work, because with radio, this theatre of the mind, and we've all been there, to think of one guy doing all the voices, male, female, the different accents that go with it, I'm thinking this is an absolute impossibility, and also trying to sell it to the audience. But then I heard it, and then after about 2 or 3 minutes, with this in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, just a moment, Mr. Gerry's got away with all this. And true, once you got yourself, as indeed all good radio drama should be, got yourself into that frame of mind of thinking you are within Acrebury itself, I was hooked.
The county of Wiltshire has many vales, hills and downs. There's the Pewsey Vale, the Deverell Valley, the Vale of Dauncey, the Marlborough Downs and of course Salisbury Plain, to name but just a handful. However, there is one area which is perhaps not so familiar, the Fox Vale.
BBC Wiltshire Sound's senior producer Keith Stainer had no doubt about the size of the task ahead.
This was, a sparkling piece of drama, locally produced, voiced by one man. Yes, the task was enormous. It was a challenge for him, but only he could achieve it, of course. No one else could do this, I'm quite sure about that. But he achieved it, and, we had the first series go out, and that was a fantastic thing to listen to.
The enthusiasm of Acrebury's creator, Gerry Hughes, kept him going through some long days as he balanced his daily duties alongside a weekly programme and masterminding new recordings of his radio drama. Before first light, as the dawn chorus broke over his Wiltshire home, Gerry was already being creative.
About 4 o'clock in the morning, I would sit up in bed and I would handwrite a script. Sometimes I might feel energetic enough to write 2 scripts, and then I would set to work. In the days when I recorded it actually at BBC Wiltshire Sound, I would go in at 6:45 in the morning and record 1, possibly 2 episodes, and then get on with the rest of my day, looking after the station's music or music reporting or whatever else I had to do. When it came to me being given the opportunity to use my own studio at home for 2 days a week, then that wasn't so crucial. And what I would do is I had a Tuesday and a Thursday to work on it. So on the Tuesday, I would spend all day writing the scripts, Thursday all day recording those scripts. And that's how it was. Yes, it was busy, and sometimes I used to go on to about 10 o'clock at night. I loved it so much. I enjoyed the whole aspect of it, and I enjoyed escaping into this amazing little world that I'd invented.
But Gerry's workload was concerning his manager, Sandy Milne.
It was a worry I had right at the outset that effectively Gerry's day job of Graham's librarian, which at the time was a very much bigger job than it is now. It was quite a responsible job, and it took a lot of time. And I did have the worry that actually that would suffer at the expense of his work on Acrebury and his enthusiasm for it. But to be fair to Gerry, it didn't suffer at all. I suppose to my chagrin, I know that he worked long hours. He worked longer hours than he was paid for, in order that he could get this done and get it to air. He wanted to do it.
Acrebury continued to attract media attention and featured in the BBC TV current affairs programme Close Up West, as concerns grew for the future of rural communities.
It's this changing countryside that inspired the fictitious village of Acrebury, transmitted daily on BBC Wiltshire Sound. It's the everyday story of country folk.
You've decided to take over this village then from us what have lived here all our lives? You be as bad as Dorothy Cottrell. You newcomers will never take the place of we true villagers.
A TV documentary in the Close Up West series coincided with the then releasing of the new rural white paper that the government at the time were producing, and what its effect had on 3 Wiltshire villages. And the producer, James McAlpine, approached BBC Wiltshire Sound and said, we'd like to include your soap opera in this, the fictional village of Acrebury. And what we did was we took a look to see how Acrebury compared with the real communities in Wiltshire.
The drama continued to make headlines in 1998 after the 1000th episode was broadcast, and copies of Acrebury were archived at the Museum of Television and Radio in New York and Los Angeles. The newspapers lapped it up.
Acrebury goes American.
Happy 1000th for the Acrebury folk.
As concern grew over major issues in real life, Acrebury remained topical. The drama's creator, Gerry Hughes, never avoided difficult or controversial subjects.
I just wanted to see his reaction when I told him the story about me being HIV positive. The look of horror on his face when I told him that load of old baloney. Just a minute. What are you saying, Penny? I thought you being HIV positive was the truth. No, of course not. I was just fixing Mr. Crichton for good and all. You cow! You bloody cow! What? Oh, he deserved it, Carol. He was a rat. It broke his marriage up. It broke his own marriage up. It's broken my marriage up. What? Why do you think this house has been sold, eh? Why? I don't know. Because my husband has left me. He's filing for divorce because I had to come clean about me seeing Jim Crichton and because I thought I might be HIV positive too.
Acrebury had been broadcast on BBC Wiltshire Sound for 4 years, when the opportunity arrived for it to be heard on the early evening regional programme across the whole of the south and west of England. The programme presenter was Sarah Gorrell.
We used to pick the best bits of all the BBC local radio stations, and we were told by the Wiltshire listeners that we were missing out on a trick because they told us about Acrebury, and it sounded so wonderful that we thought, we've got to have this, we've got to give it to the rest of the southwest. I was a bit concerned at first that it would just be something that would only appeal to the Wiltshire listeners, but of course Acrebury is so unique and so wonderful and has all human nature in there that inevitably people in Cornwall loved it, people in Bristol, all the local radio stations that we broadcast on were by their radios every evening. 10 to 10 we used to play it out, and people were just desperate for the next instalment.
In November 1999, Gerry Hughes was awarded a Guinness World Record for the longest running one-man radio soap opera, putting Acrebury back in the headlines.
Record for the West's one-man answer to the Archers.
Record-breaking soap.
But future headlines weren't so positive when a new managing editor was appointed by the BBC to oversee major changes to the output. A major storm was brewing over Acrebury as Vernon Harwood took over the managerial reins at BBC Wiltshire Sound.
Big changes for the BBC. Digitisation was very big, and the BBC in Wiltshire was only a year or two away from having digital play out and digital editing on stations, so that was big. Big focus, of course, on effective use of BBC money, and big changes on the station, then known as BBC Wiltshire Sound. And so we were looking at a new dedicated service at breakfast and mid-morning and throughout the day in news bulletins for Swindon. So a big time of change, and not revolution, but evolution of the radio station, going along with your audience, trying to be ahead of your audience if you can be, and providing something tailored and suited to the changing demands of listeners and web users.
In the shake-up which followed, some presenters were given new roles to meet the demands of providing 2 local services.
In Cricklade, Wootton Bassett and Chiseldon on 103.6 FM, BBC Radio-Swindon.
Local newspapers reported that after 6 years on the BBC, Acrebury was being dropped. Gerry Hughes insists the decision was his.
I was called into the office one day, and Vernon Harwood, who was the managing editor, said to me, "I think we're going to have to cut down the amount of episodes of Acrebury." It had been running 5 days a week with a weekend omnibus edition. He said, "I think we're going to have to cut it down to 1 episode a week." I was never really given any particular reason why that was, but I said at the time, "I don't think I can do that. I can't produce an ongoing story, soap opera, call it what you want, just for 10 minutes every Friday." I said, you'd have to have massive explanation from the presenter introducing it or whatever, say what's happened, and I can't do it that way. And he said, "Well, I think you can." He said, "I think we should do that." I wasn't happy. We went to the BBC Copyright Department in Bristol, who signed off my desire to keep the copyright of Acrebury and keep all the rights to it as my property. And Sandy Milne had countersigned the letter to say so, and that was okay and fine. So I actually went to Sandy, who was still based with us but not in the same job, and said, "Well, you were there in the early days, you countersigned the letter, have I the right to remove it?" And he said, "Of course you do, it's your property, you can take it away and do whatever you want with it." So I thought about it, and then I went back to Vernon Harwood and I sat in the office and I said to him, "Okay, we will do 5 episodes a week until the end of July." This was back in the year 2000. "And then in August, we'll go to 1 episode a week, as you want, and then I'm pulling it. I'm finishing it, because it can't run that way." He didn't look very happy. He said, "I don't want to lose it completely." I said, "Well, I'm sorry, that's what I'm going to do." And that really is how Acrebury came to the end. That's the truth. The press at that time were featuring quite a number of things about the radio station and changes and so on. Acrebury was included in that, and it said the station's popular soap opera Acrebury is being axed in the changes. That wasn't strictly true, because I was the one that decided it was going, not the station.
Gerry, really interestingly and very, very shrewdly, I thought, decided, actually, this is maybe the time to just rest Acrebury, retire Acrebury now, because it had such a heritage. And remember, of course, it had been on for such a very long time. And, of course, Gerry had other duties because we were expanding down Wiltshire Way. Because Gerry was doing all this, often in his free time as well. And he would work into the early hours of the morning putting the programme together. So instead, he refocused his attention on down Wiltshire Way, which, of course, was around real villages in Wiltshire and about real people in the county as well. And I think definitely the right decision for him.
Episode 1558 was broadcast on the 25th of August 2000, and Acrebury was consigned to history. Since then, Gerry has often thought of his fictional village like a distant memory of somewhere he used to live, wondering whatever became of the characters he once knew. Until now.
Good afternoon, BBC Wiltshire.
40 years since the first episodes of Acrebury were broadcast by Hospital Radio-Swindon, and to commemorate the 25th anniversary of BBC Local Radio in Wiltshire, 10 brand new episodes were created for Trevor Fry's Late Show.
40 years, for goodness sake. You can't ignore something like this. What an achievement. Absolutely absolutely amazing that somebody, as you say, brought it from Hospital Radio, got it onto the BBC, but to actually put it on the Late Show for the episodes we're going to run, it's the least I can do, that's one, but it's an absolute honour to actually run it, to say a happy birthday, well done, Gerry. And that's what it'll be. It's the accolade for somebody who thoroughly deserves it.
I had to sort of cherry pick which characters I thought would still be there. What would have happened to some of the characters? Old Colin Bourne-Tuck, for example. I mean, I knew that he'd be dead and gone because he would have been 100 in 2004, so therefore he won't be around anymore. But there's reference made to him. I still maintain that the new scripts more or less wrote themselves. It's a bit of a mystery to me. I didn't find it as hard work as I thought I would. So I suppose because over the years I've sort of, in the back of my mind, thought, wonder what's going on down in Acrebury now? Who's still there? Who's gone? I think so-and-so would have progressed, or they would have split up. So-and-so's probably died now. Somebody else has gone into a home. So it's a bit like living in a real village. When you move away, you think, oh, I wonder what old so-and-so's doing now. I wonder if they've still got their business or something like that. It just fell into place.
In a quiet West Wiltshire backwater, the village is like many others, with a mixture of traditional red brick houses giving way to older established buildings which have passed down the generations. Winding lanes meander past the church and tiny village school. Set back off the road, slightly obscured by tall trees, is a modern detached house. This is the 2014 home to Gerry's drama productions. A new house with a new studio and new acoustics.
I'll take you to the parish church and Acrebury Manor House now, which we've got to go downstairs for that. And then if we go through into here, well, it might look like the kitchen, but in actual fact you can probably tell the ambience is quite good, and there's a hard floor, so if you've got somebody walking into the parish church and walking down the aisle, you see it's quite good. Also used for Acrebury Manor House, Ferringham Hall, anywhere that needs a sort of a big rebounding acoustic. So if I go over here, I'll walk towards you. So the vicar's walk coming to the church, and it's coming down the aisle. Ah, good morning. How are you? Oh no, the church is a nice place to be. It's nice and peaceful, and you stay here as long as you like. And here, in our utility room, this has been posing as Acrebury Manor office, or it might be somebody's small kitchen or something like that. You know, without having to go to the lengths of putting artificial computer reverberation onto the recordings, it can be done quite naturally, which I think is quite nice, actually. Natalie! Oh, where is that girl?
Good afternoon, John.
Oh, hello, Miss Cottrell.
Usual thing, my dear.
The parish magazines? Crikey, I didn't realise it was that time already.
I'll just leave them here on the bar.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Do you know, I'm surprised this isn't all online these days.
Oh, heaven forbid.
Now, Gerry Hughes is like a character from Acrebury, as he spends more time with his vegetable garden after retiring from the BBC. The radio drama may have ended, but is never too far from Gerry's mind. He's developing an Acrebury website and hasn't ruled out writing a book, which was where the story began 40 years ago. At least he heads off into the Wiltshire sunset with his Guinness World Record intact. Or could that be under threat?
Get your feet off me. They're freezing.
I know. So I'm just warming them on you, Dad, that's why.
Leave him, Billy. He's touchy this morning.
Is it 'cause the beer was off last night or something, Dad?
No, it must have been something I ate.
It's warm under the balcony.
Ain't it funny how men can drink 15 pints of dirty beer and it's always something they ate what upsets them?
Beavering away in a remote studio on Anglesey in North Wales is Buzz Hawkins, creator of The Bradshaws.
Basically, the characters are a mum, a dad and a little boy. Billy is 7, nearly 8. He's been nearly 8 since he was first 7. And his mum is just like my mum was, and everybody else's mother, I believe, from what I've learned over the years. Gets her words mixed up, lovely stuff,
Ooh, hell hath no fury like a woman's corns.
It caught fire, the phones went mad. I was demanded to write new ones, 2 or 3 a week. And it's been like that ever since, and still growing, hopefully.
Acrebury's total now stands at 2,147 episodes. So is Buzz hunting down Gerry's world record?
No, I'm not even going to try to do that. Because it's far too way in the distance. That's over 2,000 episodes. Wow, no. I've done. It's taken me all these years to get a mere 1,250 in. So, no, I won't be hunting that record down. He can have it, and I'm glad I know about him.
Yeah, I suppose I am an eccentric in a funny sort of way. I've never come across anybody else who's done anything like this. I've come across many, many writers and novelists and the like, but I don't know if I've ever come across a one-man drama production company before.
He created a bit of escapism for people, but it was a created world of people that you could relate to and characters, because it was something to do with the place in which you lived. It had a sense of place about it. That's what made it very unique.
He's a talented, creative programme maker in his own right, in his own style. And he had a very pleasant, nice way of bringing some life to the radio.
Gerry Hughes is probably the most dedicated, passionate radio producer and creative radio producer I've come across, actually, in more than 25 years in and out of BBC Radio. And the amount of time and dedication he put to that radio serial was absolutely phenomenal.
You've got to be a bit eccentric to be in the acting world and broadcasting and all that. You have to have that very creative genius to actually put all the bits together.
Gerry's quietly passionate about what he does. He's dedicated and he's very genuine as a character. He loves people. He's very much a people person, and I think he's also very astute, and he uses all of those to put his knowledge and his astuteness into the characters that he put and created for Acrebury.
Gerry had this boundless energy. He never seemed to get exhausted over making Acrebury. I mean, I don't think I could have done that, played all the parts, written it and produced it. No, it's incredible.
I think he's an eccentric with an amazing vision. I think there are elements of both in Gerry Hughes. His enthusiasm and commitment to Acrebury hasn't altered in all these years. And the way his eyes still light up when he talks about Acrebury, that's the old Gerry.
I would never have thought in meeting him that was within him. But having seen him talk about it and do it and believe in it, then you understand, I think, where he's coming from and what he got out of it.
I would say a very creative man and a definite passion for what he does. A really super bloke.
There's people in this business who will happily think of an idea and throw it to somebody else to get on with it, and that's it. There's others that have a passion for radio, a passion for that theatre of the mind, to actually present it to somebody and say, this is my work, Acrebury, hit the button.
Yeah, I suppose it is eccentric. Is it me that's eccentric, or is it Acrebury, or maybe it's both of us? Or perhaps it's neither.
Anyone around? I don't think so, why? Can it give us a kiss? Oh, not now! Why not? Well, what if somebody comes around and catches us? Ain't it trying to be caught kissing your beloved, is it?